Brighton, let's bring to the conversation Sharon Graham, who's General Secretary of the Unite Union, who is at the TUC conference. Thank you very much for coming on. First, let me start by wishing, I hope it's a successful and enjoyable conference for you and your colleagues. What do you want to see the government do? Good morning to you, Sharon.
Good morning. Good morning, Nick. Well, look, what we're saying to the government this morning, and to Keir Starmer particularly, is that leadership is about choices. And he needs to come back from the choice that they've made on the winter fuel allowance. We shouldn't be picking the pocket of pensioners and at the same time leaving the most rich and wealthiest in our society completely untouched. They need to do a U-turn on the policy, Nick.
He's so far down the road, isn't he, Sharon? You're going to get him, you need to build him an off-ramp somehow, don't you?
Well, look, I mean, I think Labour are going to make some good choices about a lot of things, and people are excited to have different lives, not to be on their knees. But this is a cruel policy that's been put in here. People are going to suffer. You're looking at a policy that's going to change around £1.2 billion for the government. It's such a small amount of money in the greater scheme of things. There are other things that could be looked at, like a wealth tax. The 1% on the 1% richest would bring in £25 billion. Black hole gone, 3 billion over. Why is that not the choice we're making? Why are we making a choice to pick the pockets of pensioners rather than look at other areas in society that can afford to take a bit more on their shoulders?
Well, let's get those fact figures out there. You're absolutely right. It's going to cost around, broadly, 10 million people, up to £300. But as you rightly identify, will save the Treasury £1.2 billion. And indeed, if some of these people actually avail themselves of other benefits, it could be cost neutral or actually cost more. Let's get more idea then. Who do you deem to be the super rich then? Who have the broadest shoulders of all? How does that work?
Well, look, we're looking at a wealth tax, and we're putting this together. We've been looking at it for the past year. And so to give you an example, we're talking about the 50 richest families in Britain, Nick, are worth £500 billion. I mean, if we can just quantify that in some way, I mean, that's the same as half of Britain. That's the same as £33 million. And if you just tax them 1% more, just as a one-off tax, or you could do it yearly, but let's say a one-off tax, that would bring £25 billion into the economy.
But Sharon, haven't they got the best tax lawyers in town? Surely it'll all just get moved to the Cayman Islands, won't it?
Well, I mean, the evidence shows not. And of course, when you're looking at the top richest families in the world who are worth £500 billion, actually just to do 1% more, and that's just 1% more brings in £25 billion. It's nothing to them, actually, in terms of money, but it's a lot of money. The £300 is a lot of money to a pensioner trying to put their heating on. The problem you've got here, Nick, is people don't understand, genuinely don't understand, why a Labour government would make a choice to pick the pocket of pensioners rather than say we should have a wealth tax. That's not on people who are a little bit wealthy. We're talking about people that are eye-wateringly wealthy, and there's no evidence that they'd leave the country. I mean, these are scare stories that are often said around the time. We're talking about people who can absolutely afford it, and Labour needs to show that they're on the side of workers and communities this time.
Come on, Sharon, you're the General Secretary, you're the boss of the Unite Union. You'll be picking up soundings. Are you picking up there is a mood for a U-turn or some kind of watering down? What are you hearing?
Well, look, I think at the moment they are digging their heels in, and I think that's an error because it's not really important what Sharon Graham says of Unite or what Paul Novak says of the TUC. It's really important what everyday people think. And in the pubs and bars up and down the country, the conversation is, how have Labour got in?
Yes.
And the first thing they've announced that wasn't in the manifesto is to take away the fuel allowance, which, let's face it, £1.2 billion is a lot of money. But in terms of our £2.7 trillion economy, it's a drop in the ocean. It's a drop in the ocean of the black hole also. This is wrong-footed. In a leadership position, you need to be able to say, look, I've made an error. We're going to U-turn on this policy. Now, I know that's a big thing, but he may be forced to do it, maybe not in the vote tomorrow, but actually there is the people. There's the people, and the people are not happy about the decision that's been made here.
Last minute or so together, what we do hear mood music about is possible capital gains tax, inheritance tax, employer, national insurance, all featuring Rachel Reeves' first budget. Would you welcome those moves?
Well, look, obviously we'd have to see the detail of them, but capital gains tax has been spoken about for a long time. It's £16 billion there. There's an excess profit tax, which obviously could be looked at also. But I think what people want to see is fairness, Nick. If people can see something and go, well, actually, that's fair, then I think they accept it. We cannot walk towards austerity. We cannot walk towards cuts. And those with the broadest shoulders need to take more of the burden.
Finally, you talked about the mood in the pubs and clubs of the country. What about the mood in the pubs and clubs of Brighton? Fairly upbeat for the TUC. I would have thought more upbeat than for the last 10 or so 14 years.
Well, there's certainly a spring in our step, Nico. We'd be wrong to say anything other than that. But we're looking forward to a good conference and hopefully some real change in the country. And
what about the recent union pay rises? Some people would say that the rail men and women are benefiting for the pensioners' expense. Above inflation increases. Look at the doctors, 22%.
Yeah, I mean, what I'd say is that this, again, is about choices. I mean, why are we pitting workers against pensioners? Who decided that was a choice that had to be made? Workers need to get paid fairly. They need to get paid properly. They've taken pay freezes and pay cuts for numerous amounts of years. And pensioners need to feel they're in a country that puts their arms around them as they get older. We don't have to pit those two sets of people against each other. That's not necessary.
Have a good one, Sharon. Thank you for your time. Sharon Graham, General Secretary of the Unite Union, joining us from the TUC conference down in Brighton.